moving from one part of a career to the next, there's things that you see modeled that you think to yourself, I don't just want that for me, I want it for others. I want that for everyone, right? I want everyone to be in a place that they're at for 13 years where they have one bad day. That's saying something, right? I had one bad day in 13 years.
Hey, Loren.
Hey, Kelsey. Happy fall. Is it fall? Happy fall.
I think we call it fall, but
fall.
We're in the middle of a heat wave. 98 degrees here.
Yeah, right.
It's like that hot flash before it becomes fall. We're here for another episode of Campus Confidential.
We
really
are
excited for today's episode. First guest of season 3. You want to tell us who we have on today?
Yes. Well, if you're in the campus housing industry, you probably know this person or this name. If not, let me tell you a little bit about Jason Taylor. Jason is the managing partner for public-private partnerships, which you hear referred to as P3 in the industry. And he works for a company called the Annex Group. He's a partner there, as I mentioned. The Annex Group does housing development and construction and management for student housing and actually other kinds of housing in cities and communities around the country. They're in 17 states. And Jason has, I think he said 25 years. I know it's over 20 years. I think he said 25 years helping, in this case, universities with campus housing solutions, worked for a number of companies throughout the industry. And notably, he's been, unlike maybe some corporate or business partners, he's been really involved in higher ed. He got a start in housing at the University of Michigan. He then went to the private sector. He served on the Akuhawai Foundation Board of Trustees, and just a couple of months ago in Milwaukee at the annual conference was awarded the Outstanding Corporate Friend Award by Akuhawai, the housing profession. So a good friend to many in higher education, and certainly been a good colleague and friend to you and I. So I'm delighted he was first.
Yeah. And I would add a great storyteller. I think it was fun coming back into this season and having someone who is a storyteller at heart be the guest, because I think this is one you can put in your AirPods or headphones or whatever, your car, go on a walk, just sit back and listen to kind of his story and journey. It was fun to be along for that ride.
Yeah. And this episode is about career change. How you know when you need to make a career change, what kinds of things crossed his mind, and who was influential, in those kinds of decisions. And I'll just spoil a little and say his mom. So those of you who want a mom story, stay tuned.
So tune in. Well, let's listen in, and we'll see you on the flip side.
Sounds good.
In this season, we're setting each episode up with a prompt and a question. And the one that we've been thinking about with you is, tell us about a time when you knew it was time for a career change.
Yeah. Gosh. So the story I like to tell is that I'm really blessed in my career that I can genuinely say that I've only ever had one bad day of work that I didn't think was my own fault, right? We've had those projects you didn't win and you went, oh, I could have done these things better, or like we could have interviewed better, or we should have thought about it more creatively, or whatever the thing may be. And I'll kick myself and I always go to bed early those nights and they're tough. But I'm blessed that in a career that started in 1999 at the University of Michigan in the housing office and has spanned 25 years to now, that I had one bad day that was like, hey, that wasn't my fault. That was because I'm not at the right place. And my mother, back when it happened, told me this story, which I have now learned to be apocryphal, but I've repeated it so many times, and she did too. There's she says, don't be a baboon. And my mother passed away recently. She said it till she died. I think she kept telling this story, and she'd say, don't be a baboon. What are you talking about? And my mother would say, there's these baboons that live in the Namib Desert in Southwest Africa. And if you talk to the people there going back centuries, when they were thirsty and couldn't find water, they would trap these baboons. And they dig a hole in the ground that was just big enough for the baboon to put its hand in. They put a big lump of salt in this hole because baboons love salt. As soon as the baboon goes to grab the lump of salt, it can't get its hand back out. And the salt has the effect of swelling the baboon's hand. But the baboon won't let go because it just loves salt. And so even though it's not good for it, right? And it won't let go. The people who are trapping it come by. They see that they've laid this trap, that they've got the baboon. They free the baboon from the trap. They dig around its hand and take it out. They put it in a cage and they give it all the salt it can eat. All the salt it can eat for a couple of hours. They open the door to the cage and the baboon is so dehydrated that it leads them to the nearest source of water. And my mother says, don't be a baboon. I say that to say that we find ourselves often, I have found myself and myself in my career often trapped by having what I thought I wanted, the veneer of what I thought I wanted, or even the recognition of the thing that I thought that I've wanted. And it stopped me from going for the water. It stopped me from going for the thing that I said I would do when I was a freshman in Mary Markley Hall at the University of Michigan, and we all thought we were going to rule the world, right? And so my mother says this all the time as a way to say, don't let what you have stop you from getting what you want, even if what you have is pretty damn good. Don't be a baboon. So I won't get into too much detail, and Loren knows some of this, but I found myself with really having two big career inflection points in my career. The first was the idea to leave the University of Michigan with like a really good paycheck and something called health insurance when I was 24, which
Health
was
insurance.
Who needs that?
great, right? That was awesome. I made this decision that I was going to move to Chicago because I always wanted to live in Chicago, right? So I said, I'm going to move to Chicago. And I said, I just got to find a job in a housing office somewhere in and around Chicago. No big deal. Michigan must be the greatest university in the world. So obviously everyone will hire me for these jobs for which I'm clearly not qualified as a 24-year-old kid. And so I applied for all these roles at U Chicago and at Northwestern and at DePaul and at Loyola and at Columbia College and you name it in and around Chicago. And a few of them I got interviews, but almost invariably did not move forward. A man named Eric Luskin, who was a former, you all know Eric, who's a former associate director of residence life, among other things, director of family housing at University of Michigan, had helped start a company called the Annex Group here in Chicago, which was a privatized student housing company. And I remember when Eric called me and said, hey, I heard you're leaving Ann Arbor. I heard you're looking for a job. I've heard some pretty good and interesting things about you from my former colleagues and your current colleagues. Would you want to come talk to me about our privatized student housing company? And I remember the first words out of my mouth were, what the hell's a privatized student housing company? Now I've been working for them for 20 years now. It was an opportunity. I actually had wound up getting an offer in hand not an offer, but like moving to a last interview at U Chicago and was told I'd have an offer. I packed up a moving truck. I said, I'm just going to go live with my sister and her family in Chicago for a month or two. I'll either have this job at U Chicago or I'll find another job. And on a Thursday, I had just literally finished packing up this moving truck. I was going to move on Saturday. Eric Luskin called me and said, hey, remember that we talked a couple months ago? I said, yeah, hey, Eric, how's it going? How's your privatized student housing company, whatever that is? And Eric said, really well. In fact, we're growing. We're working on all these projects, and we really need someone who understands campus housing because we're working with more and more universities. And he said, what would you think about coming and working with this? And I said, well, I don't know. What I don't know, Eric. It's privatized student housing. I think I want to be in the steady paycheck of university world. And Eric said, well, I've got good news and I've got bad news. He said, the good news is I have a job for you. Here's how much I'll pay you. And it was, more money than I, could wrap my head around at the time. Of course, I was 25. And on top of that, we're just going to grow this platform of what we do. And one day you'll run it. I said, okay. And he said, I said, what's the bad news? He said, I need someone to start on Monday. This was a Thursday. I said, well, Eric, I'm looking outside my window at a moving truck that I just packed, and I'll be there on Saturday. What time can I be there, be in your office? And I started at 9:00 on Monday morning, learning that I was going to plan the move-in for a 1,700-bed community University Center of Chicago in downtown Chicago. And I wound up doing that, working there for 13 years thereafter. And it was an awesome time. The second inflection point, and so that was a decision to go from steady paycheck university world to a startup. I was the sixth employee of the company, right? So truly a startup, a private.
And how big is it now?
Yeah. I think they must be around 2,000 employees, if not more. I think they're one of the top 5 largest operators of student housing in the country, and one of the more active advisors. So they're massive. And they were about the day I left, they were at about 1,600 employees from 6 that I started with. And the fun part, speaking of my mother, the funny part is for the first 5 or 6 years that I worked at Scion until we got like a little bit bigger and had, in her opinion, a more impressive office. My mother would periodically send me job openings at places she thought were like Fortune 500 companies. Like, hey, there's a job. There's a job at McDonald's. It's working with data, and you're good with data, right? It was hilarious. The second big inflection point was the idea to go from advising colleges and universities and working with awesome people like Loren Rullman and all his colleagues at University of Michigan to being a developer, right? So it was like, I felt Darth Vader enough going from higher ed to working at a privatized student housing company. But talk about joining the dark side. Now I'm going to these evil, greedy, evil developers, and I'm going to go be a greedy, evil developer. But I like going to groundbreakings, but I also want to go to ribbon cuttings. And so I decided I'm going to go on the development side, and on the side where it goes from helping universities understand their risk to determining how to balance a university's risk with the risk of private capital, right? The risk of a private entity.
First thing is, I love your mother's wisdom, by the way.
Thank you.
Fantastic. And, Kelsey talks a lot about how this podcast, the value of it is in the story. And what your mother did for you is tell you a story. I love the power of story to help sort of make a point. So thanks for sharing that. I just think it's really wonderful. And I'm going to use it if I might, and I'll attribute it properly to your family.
Just make sure that you tell anyone who asks that it's apparently apocryphal, apparently wholly untrue, though it was told for hundreds of years.
Let me ask you a question, though, about this. You made this decision, you talk about a second inflection point, moving from advising institutions to the developer role. Talk a little bit about what were you feeling when you were thinking about making a change that maybe listeners might understand because they're feeling it. And what did you use as resources or data or whatever to help you decide to actually do something about what you were feeling?
Yeah, that's a really great question, Loren. So it was a combination of things. One was just this nagging feeling that I was missing something, that I was helping universities, but not to the extent that I could. Two, the idea that, in my opinion at the time, there was a fair amount of competition in the P3 space, right? In the public-private partnership space. But it was mostly seeking the same kinds of transactions and looking at sort of, a haves and have not sort of two-tiered types of transactions. There's your big public flagship schools, and we're going to give them all the private equity and capital that they want. And there's everyone else, and they can do these deals mostly using master leases and putting it on their own balance sheet and taking all of the economic risk. And I didn't see where the partnership was in that. And in thinking through it, I thought to myself, well, where could I go that would think about it the way that I think about it? As I was,
so you weren't unhappy. You weren't unhappy in your situation. You thought something was missing in you and in the relationship with institutions. Is that fair?
Right. That's exactly right, Loren. That's a perfect way to say it. I loved my job. I loved what I did at Sun. I loved it all the way up until the last day I was there. It was a phenomenal opportunity to work with, so many institutions, so many different types of institutions, so many people. You talk about stories, right? And we think about all the professionals who you've run into on every campus and their stories, how they got there. My dear friend Steve Frederick, who's the head of advancement at Clinton Community College, and who, he and I have a standing appointment to go hunting up in upstate New York. Right. How do you, right, at this, have you ever been to Clinton Community College? It's a wonderful university that used to be on Lake Champlain across from Burlington, Vermont. That was a resort for many presidents. It was a summer resort for many presidents. It's got a wonderful history, and that's the building that the classes are taught in. How could you not love being able to go? Every campus has a story, and a lot of stories, and the people on those campuses have stories. God, that's the part that I still miss about advisory work, is that I work now with a few campuses at a time instead of maybe a dozen or more. But it was not unhappiness, Loren. I think it was, to the point about that analogy, I'm holding on to something that works for me, but doesn't advance what I said I wanted to do in my life, which is I've gotten to now, right? Which is about really having impact for people and communities and lives. And we can talk about that. But so for me, it was, how do I get there? So I looked at everyone in the industry who sort of does this, right? Who does kind of P3. I talked to a few of them. I talked to a few of them about how they thought I could fit and where they thought I could fit. I was real honest about the types of institutions that I want to work with and help. And, then I called a few people, Loren, kind of like you, right? I called Alma Celine. I called Shannon Staten. I called, many of my, Gavin Leach, and many of my mentors and friends, and just said, what do you think? What if I went and did this crazy thing? And many of them were very supportive, and many of them talked about doing it the right way. And by the way, I also called people who said to me, well, I would never do P3 on my campus. And I said, why? Right. And there were varying answers to that question. But for many of them, I said, so you're just looking for the right partner, and they haven't presented themselves. I wound up having a wonderful conversation with Julie Skolnicki and Tom Triviana at EDR at the time, which then became Graystar. And I realized right away that they thought about it the same way I thought about it, that there's, as this big publicly traded student housing REIT, there's a place and a space for, the deals they were doing on very big campuses, but also a place and a space for other campuses. They actually were the ones who did that deal at Northern Michigan University, right? Using equity, right? I think in today's marketplace in 2024, we wouldn't see a private capital deal at a project like at a campus like Northern Michigan University for a lot of reasons, right? And so I really kind of said, okay, well, you're going to let me run with this, and when I tell you an opportunity is a good opportunity, we're going to talk about it, and we're going to maybe agree that there are institutions that we can pursue that we either haven't in the past or haven't thought about how we might de-risk those or find the right risk balance in the past. Let's do that. And they let me run with that and let me really figure out ways to approach campuses that we in the past may have either dismissed out of hand or couldn't figure them out. And I think with the experience I had at Sign and being able to better understand what was going on in those campuses, why, and what the opportunity, how the opportunity had risk or not, I was able to really translate that to, okay, here's what they want. Here's what their advisor says they need. Here's what we can do or can't do. And by the way, if they got creative about these two things and we got creative about this one thing, there's a bridge there. Yeah. Don't we all want to do this deal? Right.
Yeah. And what I hear in your answer, I think too, is so you had an instinct that was about something missing, A, in the marketplace, but something, B, for your career. You had a process that worked for you, which was to sort of do a 360 assessment on your decision by talking with other people, and understood something about your value system, which is I'd like to do it differently for people that I care about in higher ed. And I suppose that what I'm also thinking about is the utility of that for people on campuses, which is when they're feeling something, they could be perfectly happy, fully fulfilled, but feeling something about change, and then having a way to actually assess your own desire for that and understanding your value system and doing that. I think those are great lessons, Jason, and I appreciate that story.
So I'm going to follow that piece then with a question of, I think sometimes when people get that feeling, what I heard from you is exactly what Loren said. You started doing this research and reaching out. How long did it take you to actually make the move? Let's use Scion you went Scion to Graystar. Is that right? Am I following that right?
EDR. Yeah.
EDR. Yeah. How long did it take?
Yeah. It was
for that
process of, I mean, the kernel of seeing that ribbon cutting was in January when they moved the students in. The kernel of why is this nagging at me so much was probably March. The idea that, okay, I'm going to start talking to a few people was probably, May or June. And then around Labor Day of 2017, I started at EDR. So it was 8 months.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But I have to say, Loren, you use the word values, and I think that's values are interesting because they mean a lot of things, right? So, and what you value and how much you value it changes as your career goes forward, right? One of the things that I find myself valuing today more than I did 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago is the ability to impact and grow people, right? The ability to take my own experience, to understand their story, and to be able to help them write the next chapter of that story, right? That wasn't important to me in the time that I made that change from Scion to EDR. It was very important to me in the time that I made the change from ACC to Annex, right? But those things change, right? The things that we value change. When I went from from Scion to EDR, which became Graystar, the value was wanting to grow my own ability to have some impact on how P3s work, right? And to learn them better, right? To be more in the deal. To one of those values was growing my own toolkit. When I went from EDR to ACC, I think predominant value at the time for me was about being in a team and Graystar to ACC, being in a team that's all, being on a really great team, right? Working for really great people. Jamie Wilhelm, the best boss I've ever had, at ACC, the chief development officer there now, was my boss at ACC, best boss I've ever had. The ability to go work for someone, right, who I know. One of the things Jamie said to me, I said, Jamie, I'm an investment committee at Graystar. I was an investment committee at EDR. I want to be on investment committee at ACC. And Jamie said, that's not going to happen here. But what I can promise you, and that was the honesty, right? But what I can promise you, and this was the advocacy, is that when I'm in that room, you'll be in there with me. Right? When I'm in that room, you'll be in that room with me. And that works both ways, right? When Jamie would leave that room, others who were in the room would say, hey, Jason, great job. I wasn't in that room physically. Jamie brought me in that room with him, right? When Jamie would leave that room, Jamie would come to me and say, hey, here's some of the questions that were asked. Here's how people thought about it. Here's some ways that I'm thinking about it. Let's work together on how we get there. That advocacy was important. And then I think moving from ACC to Annex, one is about that impact, right? I've been at the two biggest places that do this, right? How can I multiply my own impact? And I went to an impact housing developer, surprise, surprise. And two, how can I have the type of impact on people and the people who I work with that Jamie had on me, right? That Eric Luskin had on me. And that wasn't important to me 10 years ago. It's really important now.
You emphasized honesty and advocacy when you were telling that story. Are those qualities that you then use or used to look for opportunities, or are those things you discovered? You were talking about your value shift. How do you get clarity? How does anybody get clarity over what matters to them when they're deciding to evaluate the job they're in and the one they want to go to? How has that come clear to you, other than your mom's wise stories?
Yeah, I think Terry Bump, who I think we all know was one of my colleagues at American Campus, and one of the things that Terry has always emphasized. In fact, I took plug with her yesterday, believe it or not. But one of the things that Terry has always sort of emphasized with me is, before I was even at ACC, if you can believe it, has been you have to be willing to take care of your people. Right? You have to be willing to take care of your people. And if you take care of your people will take care of you. And I say that, Loren, to say that, and to answer your question, I think directly, when moving from one part of a career to the next, there's things that you see modeled that you think to yourself, I don't just want that for me, I want it for others. I want that for everyone. Right. I want everyone to be in a place that they're at for 13 years where they have one bad day. Right. Mm-hmm. That's saying something, right? I had one bad day in 13 years, right? At Zion. I want everyone to be at a place that they feel like they have the freedom and autonomy to be themselves, authentically, truly themselves, whether that means intellectually, whether that means emotionally, whether that means the character that they bring to it, and that they feel like they can thrive in doing so, and they have the support to do so. Doesn't mean working off independently, off by yourself. And I think the third thing is, I want everyone to feel like they're in a place that that everyone is transparent, that everyone is honest, and that people are advocating for others with whatever power that we might have to advocate for them when they've earned it.
Is there anything that I want to ask it maybe two different ways and you can decide which direction. Is there anything when you think back over the career changes that you regret or maybe that you would do differently?
Yeah, I won't be too specific, but I'm going to tell another story. And I think we all know it, the infamous story of the scorpion and the frog. Right. So the frog is standing on the scorpion standing on the shore of the stream, and the frog comes across, and the scorpion says, "Hey, frog, I need you to take me to the other side. I got to get over there. Let me ride on your back." And the frog says, "Well, why would I do that? You're a scorpion. You're gonna sting me." And the scorpion says, "Well, look, think about it. I got to get to the other side of the river. You got to get to the other side of the river. And if I sting you, we're both going to drown. I can't swim." And the frog says, "Okay, well, that makes pretty good sense." And so they set off, and in the middle of the stream, the scorpion stings the frog. And as the frog is drowning, it says, "Why would you do that?" And the scorpion, while it's drowning, says, "I'm a scorpion." Right? Mm-hmm. which is to say that I think, going right along with what I just talked about what you can see and feel around you, we've all worked with people who are unethical. Let's be honest, right? We've all worked with people who are not truthful. We've all worked with people who name all the bad tendencies, aspects, and things who lie, right? Who all of those things, who are mean unnecessarily, who are vindictive, who are whatever the things are. And we've seen them turn them on others. And because we're the baboon, to tie a couple stories together, we convince ourselves they'd never do it to me, or it's not that bad, right? And I can tell you, my one bad day that I had in 13 years at Zion, that scorpion stung me. Right?
Yep.
That scorpion stung me. And so what I would say is, if you're the frog and you see the scorpion, haul your behind over back across the river by yourself, because eventually that scorpion's going to sting you.
I had a colleague used to say to me, Loren, it's a toaster. It's going to make toast. Why are you asking it not to make toast? So it's like, yeah, you're right. So yeah.
It's kind of, right. Someone shows you who they are, believe them.
That's right.
Yeah, that's right.
Right?
That's right.
That's right.
So I think that's an amazing piece. And I also think on the flip side, when you're in a position or you're in a space where the environment is serving you well, it is okay to be content and happy and do the thing you love that you are doing. I think so often, sometimes we have this, well, I need to be striving for what's next or more or different or better. And I think there's this balance. I mean, you were at Scion for 13 years. It's not like, oh, you pack the truck up and then 2 years later, I got to pack the truck up. So who knows? The timeline for people is different, but I think, these stories you're telling, it's about what are your values? What is your awareness of them? How are you aware of the space and the place, and how are you feeling in that? And
but Kelsey, I'm going to challenge you. I'm going to challenge you only somewhat, which is to say, not being the baboon doesn't mean you have to leave the place you are. It may mean you have to change the way that you're there. Right.
That's right.
I'm going to go out on a limb. I don't work at Workshop or Compass and say that neither of your job descriptions say you're going to run the Campus Confidential podcast, but you're doing it because there's something more that the two of you wanted, not only for yourselves, but for higher education and for the industry. Right. And that's fulfilling to you. And it's a great resource to the rest of us. Right. Doesn't mean you moved anywhere or went anywhere. You slightly changed the dial on a thing that you were already doing or added something to what you were doing, right? When I was at ACC, we had all these wonderful opportunities for partnership. We partnered with a wonderful group called START out of Salt Lake City that does entrepreneurship, living, learning communities. That doesn't change who we are, what we do, how we operate, what our goal is in life, what my job was. But I got to go around the country with my friend Vic Gill from START and advocate and evangelize for experiential and entrepreneurial living on community colleges. How cool is that? That wasn't in my job description. That wasn't a thing that existed when I got there, but it was a thing that we got to do. So I guess what I'm saying is I hear you, right? There's nothing wrong with saying I'm really happy and content where I am, but I will challenge you to say that wanting more doesn't mean a better title necessarily, doesn't mean more money necessarily, doesn't mean more responsibility necessary. It just means you may need that next thing that helps to fulfill you. And it may be sitting right in the seat that you're in, right in the place you are.
100% agree with that. 100%.
Just to throw out, since we're doing stories cliches, it's sort of a know thyself thing, right? I mean, you do you. If you spend 35 years at this place and that's fulfilling for you and you don't feel the compunction of this sort of thing that's inside you, awesome. What lucky colleagues and people you serve. If you feel this need to move because you have some desire to do something different or impact differently, whatever, then awesome. You do that too, right? So, I mean, I think that's the thematic sort of consistency that I hear in both of you. And I hope our listeners hear too. I have I think maybe a question on my mind, Jason, that is, so when you look back at those career changes, what's the advice that you would give your younger self that you now know and couldn't have known then? What advice would you give your younger self for career changes?
Gosh, that's a really great question. I think the biggest advice, it always goes back to my mom. The biggest advice I would give myself is something my mother told me when I was 16 years old and won a science award at Flint Northern High School, which is be humble. Be humble.
Mm-hmm. Be humble.
I think we have to go into a space with humility. And I think we have to be intentional about the humility with which we go into those spaces. I think we have a tendency to want to prove ourselves, and it lets us get out over our skis. And everyone loves the new hire and the new shiny object, and you can really start to feel yourself, right? And the reality is, most of the time, not my example of going to a place that was 6 of us, but most of the time, this place has existed for a long time before you. It will exist for a long time after you. Your job is to have the most impact that you can, however, whatever that means to you in the time that you're there. And no one does that by themselves. And I think the biggest lesson to me is again, going back to what my mom said. So it's not a new lesson, Loren, but be humble. And I think that entering a space with intentional humility, I think is really, really important to provide. We talk about this in my religious life about providing the space to be intentional about how you are in the space, how you give in the space, and how you receive in the space. Mm-hmm. Right. And there's humility in giving and receiving.
That's great. Well, in addition to the wisdom of mothers, really appreciate your helping us think about being clear about values, one's own values when making decisions, and how they can shift over time in a career. So being attuned to how they might shift. The career change can be for growth, not dissatisfaction. Or, as Kelsey reminds us, there may be no career change. You're doing what you do well where you are and love that. The impact for people. You talked about wanting to make a different kind of impact for people, and I really appreciate that. That's, of course, what higher education is all about. And then I guess the last thing that I was thinking is you said you had one bad day in your career that wasn't your fault, and I hope this wasn't the second. We really we really appreciate you spending some time with us, Jason.
This is, if anything, this is a highlight. This is a ton of fun, and it's good to finally be on. As an avid listener, it's good to finally be on with you. I feel like NPR, long-time listener, first-time caller.
I love that.
It's good to finally be on with the two of you, and this has been an absolute blast. Thank you so much.
I mean, I guess Loren's ready for extra credit.
I have an extra credit.
No. Okay.
You ready for an extra credit?
I'm ready for extra credit.
Okay.
I know you're ready for it.
So normally you have the extra credit question, right?
That's right.
This one's a more of a quiz, not a question.
Oh, goodness.
So I don't know.
Very good at tests.
You have test anxiety already?
Nervous. I'm like, whew, okay.
Okay, so it's even called the Higher Ed Quiz. This was in the Chronicle of Higher Education this week. So I didn't invent this, and I already took it. Any good academic person is going to sort of see how the thing works as a test. I took it. I didn't do very well. I was a little smug. I thought, I'm going to do, I'll know most of these, maybe even all of them. I didn't do very well. There were 15 questions. I won't ask all 15.
Oh, I was like, I'm definitely going to fail.
I failed. I got 6 out of 15 right. Oh. So I didn't do very well, but I thought, this is going to be fun. I've got to ask Kelsey these questions. All right. You ready? So I won't ask 15. Should I just pick like half of them just to have a little fun here? Okay.
Born ready. Do it fast. Let's just go fast.
Which four-year public university cost the most for out-of-state students during the last academic year? UVA, Washington, Oregon, or UCLA?
I'm going UVA.
Good. Me too. UVA in 23.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Out-of-state tuition fees, room and board at UVA for 23-24 is $71,954.
Woo!
Yeah, great school.
Great school.
All right. Question number 2. Which type of college had the highest share of students aged 21 and under? 4-year private, 4-year public, 2-year public, 4-year private. Highest share of students 21 and under.
2-year public.
It is 2-year public.
Yes.
I know. I thought there'd be more adult, over 21. I thought it would be a higher share of, but good job.
We might want to stop here. 2 for 2.
That's pretty good. All right.
But I will just say real quick, I think community colleges and I think where students are 18 to 21 right now, they want to temperature check themselves before they commit to what their long-term plan is. And I think a community college is a great place.
Me too.
To continue your education, to see what you really want to be doing.
Yeah,
so,
I thought
let's go community colleges.
That there were just the enrollment numbers being higher at lots of 4-years, and community colleges have more adult students. It'd be a higher share of under 21s elsewhere. But I was thinking about it too much. So again, I was wrong.
Seems right.
Which state had the highest number of colleges represented among the 50 most expensive 4-year private institutions? California, New York, Connecticut, Massachusetts. Highest number of colleges among the 50 most expensive.
Massachusetts.
New York. Yeah, New York had 11 colleges, one more than Massachusetts. So you were close.
Oh,
you were thinking
close.
Boston, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, me too. I know.
Yeah.
Yep. I got that one right for the record.
Oh, okay. So we're 2-1, both of us.
We're tied. Okay, let me pick another one here. Which university granted the most PhDs in 21-22? Walden University, University of Michigan Ann Arbor, University of Florida, Texas A&M College Station.
Oh, this feels like a setup.
Corey's nodding.
I mean, I want to say University of Michigan, but for some reason, I think it might be Texas A&M. Texas A&M.
University of Michigan awarded 861 PhDs. Walden 829, A&M 793, Florida 771.
Go blue.
Go blue.
I just felt like you were trying to trick me.
I know, it did sound like a trick question.
I blame the proctor for that question.
I was a proctor in college. It's good money. How many colleges had an endowment worth $10 billion or more in the 23 fiscal year? 30 colleges, 30 colleges, 10 colleges, 18 colleges, or 23 colleges?
18.
The number is 18. 18 colleges that had endowments worth at least $10 billion in the 23 fiscal year.
I think I need
which of these 4-year public institutions had the biggest percentage jump in enrollment between 2012 and 2022? Georgia Tech, Southern, Clemson, or UNC Wilmington? Biggest percentage change.
Ooh. It's between Georgia Tech and Wilmington for me. I'll go Georgia Tech.
Georgia Tech, 110.5%. You're killing it.
Killing it.
All right.
I'm on a roll.
Last question. Let's make this the last
solo.
one. How many 4-year private colleges were in Vermont in the 22-23 academic year? How many 4-year private colleges? 5, 7, 19, or 11?
11.
You got it. Yeah.
Yes.
I asked you.
Lord. I feel.
I asked you the easy ones. No, you're on fire.
Ask me the easy ones. I mean, this might have to be continued.
I could ask you the other half next time.
Yeah. Okay. To be continued.
Good job.
All right. See you all next time.
Campus Confidential is presented by Compass Group, produced by Corey Inscoe, with your hosts Kelsey, Harmon, Finn, and Loren and Rullman.